When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the GreaseGoblin YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to be continuing on our Song of Ice and Fire reread, or specifically a Game of Thrones, and we're going to be hitting Sansa 5. And I've been looking forward to this chapter. You guys maybe don't look forward to Sansa early on, you might even not even like Sansa, but this is a very important chapter for Sansa, right? I think there's a lot of good moments for the character. I think George kind of really starts to hit his strides with writing this character. There's a lot to like dive into with the psychology of Sansa. It's not a particularly long chapter for Sansa in any regard, but like it's just a really good one. There's a lot of things that are very interesting that happen in this chapter. But as a recap, again, Sansa is in King's Landing. Ned has been captured. This is after the chapter that she had, you know, sent the letter to her family members in Catelyn and Robb to bend the knee. And so she, and mainly in this chapter, is going to be focused on how do I save my father. It's a very interesting chapter to look at from her perspective. So a couple other things before we get into the video. One, sorry for no video Sunday. I just had a wedding that I was a best man in, so just didn't have as much time as I would have liked to get that video out. Second thing, you guys really like to comment on my bed not being made, so I'm going to show you guys what my bed being made looks like, just so you get some perspective. So, you guys see all these blankets right here, right? You see all that? I don't use that. That just stays on my bed. The only blanket I use is this one, and I'm going to show you what my bed actually looks like made. My bed is now made. As you can see, not much changed because I sleep with one blanket. So just because of the memers and the jokesters in the comments, I wanted to point this out. All this you see back here, this is just, it's just there unless I get cold at some point. But I sleep with one blanket because I'm very hot when I sleep. Just wanted to point that out because I wanted to be a little bit of a funny guy and respond to some comments because I see them quite a lot. But yeah. So let's get into Sansa 5, A Game of Thrones, page 618. Sansa notes how the throne room walls have been stripped of Robert's tapestries. Again, kind of just showing that this is a new regime, right? We're kind of out with the old, in with the new. And you kind of might be thinking, oh, well, it's because they're going from Robert to Joffrey, the Baratheons to the Lannisters. And yes, I mean, that is an observation, but I think this is just normal, right? As one king dies and the next one comes to power, there's going to be obvious changes in the way that they like designing their throne room, the way that they have interests in. And think about all these different kings if we go through Targaryen history. Usually all of them are different, right? Almost polar opposites when you think about it, right? Think about Aegon to Aenys, Aenys to Maegor, Maegor to Jaehaerys, Jaehaerys then to Viserys. Like, they're almost like polar opposites, each individual like king, and they have different values. And so it makes a lot of sense that the throne room is going to change. Now, this is a bit more dramatic because it's basically a new house taking over power in the Lannisters, and Cersei doesn't really like Robert, so trying to kind of force one to show who is the real power now of Westeros in the Lannisters, but also to show again Robert is not very well loved by Cersei. Sansa then notes how she had been given freedom to explore the castle again. She's given this because she's been a good little servant for Cersei, more or less, and so Cersei's like, yeah, you can have some freedom as a reward, as if Sansa's like a dog. But Sansa, as much as we, say that Sansa can be, not exactly stupid, but she can be someone that doesn't see the full picture or look at reality, she realizes this isn't really freedom, right? All she's able to do is roam around the Red Keep, and even then, she has a constant escort on her, basically to make sure she doesn't leave, right? And again, Cersei tries to say, oh, this is your honor guard and all of that, but that's not the truth, and Sansa realizes that. So again, we do see that Sansa is quite smart in at least picking up on that. But Sansa isn't really that bothered by this, right? Because again, think about it from Sansa's point of view. She's not Arya. She's not someone that's very resourceful, is going to be able to get out of the city or escape. Her being able to go out of the Red Keep means pretty much nothing for her, right? She sees no real feasible way to get out of the city, and she's correct in that, right? She has none of the skills that allows Arya to escape, and even when Arya escapes, she gets extremely lucky. Sansa doesn't have that luxury, and so Sansa is just happy to be able to go to some of the places that she's more accustomed to be able to pray, and the gardens. And so at this point, again, Sansa is just happy for that, right? She probably doesn't want the escorts, but again, she's still happy with the little freedom that she does have. Something else I find that's very different, something that I find very interesting, is we talk a lot about Sansa and how different she is from the Starks. She is another person that does not take really the old gods at this point of the story. We're told that she goes to the Sept quite a lot to pray for Ned, which is very different, right? A lot of the Starks take the old gods, or at least most of them. Now, this isn't to say Sansa only goes to the Sept. She does go to the Godswood as well, but it does show that, like, Sansa is kind of in this position where, yes, by blood, she's a Stark, but on the other side of it, her personality, her values do not reflect the North. And so I find that's a very interesting, like, ideology there, right? Where Sansa is still in between on the new gods and the old gods, showing how her personality is, where she's torn between the values of the South and the North. Very similar and very apparent, and more of a character like Theon, but I'd like to point that out here with Sansa here as well. That gets us a new page 619. Also, sorry guys, I forgot to change the screen back while I was doing my little tangent, so sorry about that, but we are back to this screen. But also, something else it shows with Sansa and going to both of the different places of worship for the gods is that she's willing to do anything that she can to help free her father. If she believes that praying for both gods, or whatever she actually truly believes at this point, she just wants to help her father and pray for him. But that kind of gets us to the present. The day was an uneasy one, as it was to be the first court session under Joffrey's reign. And if you're like a common person, or not really a common person, I would say more of a noble person, a lord or a lady, this kind of brings a lot of unease, right? You've just had a coup that's gone down, right? Think about Arya's chapter. Everybody was staying indoors. Nobody was outside. There's a lot of unease right now. And when you also think about all these other things going on, where there's war in the Riverlands, Renly and Stannis seem to be plotting against the throne. We don't know what they're up to at this point of the story yet, but there's a lot of unease. And that's something that Sansa notes here. If you think about the differences, when Robert was king, there would be 100 lords calling upon him, or at least an audience. But with Joffrey, there's only about 20. It shows something that I think is very important. People are not just backing Joffrey right away, right? Because they're unsure. If you start backing Joffrey and say Stannis wins, well, that's not a good look for you, right? You want to keep as much favor and power that you can. You don't want your family to be killed just for supporting the wrong house. Think about the Blackfire rebellions, right? If you're one of the major houses, you tended to kind of stay out of it. And so that's kind of what I think is important here to kind of understand, is that this is a major point of conflict now. Not everybody is united. There are people that are going to wait out the war. There's people that are going to go against you, right? Think about Renly specifically. But as Sansa pushes to the front of the people in attendance, she notices many, but none will even look at her. Again, she seems almost like a ghost. Again, very important to understand for Sansa is like, all these people have treated you really well and treated you really nicely. And now that, you know, your father was a traitor and you have no real power anymore, people don't look at you. They don't want to be caught looking at the traitor's daughter, because maybe that's going to get them some ill will with the Lannisters or the people in power at this moment. It shows you a lot about the people of King's Landing, and something that's, you know, Sansa's going to come to understand in her time in King's Landing as well. But she notes Pycelle already at the council, almost in a sleep-like state, but Varys and Littlefinger soon join. But we do get a curious line about how Littlefinger goes to talk to specifically Balon Swan and Dantos. Again, foreshadowing that connection specifically with Dantos of things to come. But at this, Sansa becomes very nervous. She isn't sure why. Again, in her mind, she thinks, again, this is, you know, something that's very nerve-wracking and all of that, but she feels like, hey, Cersei and Joffrey love me. This should go all right. It's kind of like, I think for me, if you're thinking about any type of public speaking, where it's like, yes, you've rehearsed your speech, or you know exactly what you're talking about, but there's still that thought in your mind, like, what if something goes wrong? What if I slip up here? What if I say something wrong? Now amplify that into how Sansa is feeling, right? If Sansa says something wrong, if she talks out of line, she does something that just minorly is wrong, that could mean dire consequences for her father and also her safety as well. So again, you kind of take that and then you put it with what else Sansa's kind of dealing with, because Sansa at this point has to feel like she is really the only person that can help Ned at this time. And to a degree, she's right. Because what is going to be able to sway the Lannisters not to kill Ned or do anything bad to Ned? Yes, we know that Cersei doesn't want to do those things because she eventually wants to make peace. So does Tywin. But Joffrey is the key to kind of everything, and Sansa is going to use that in this chapter. She's going to play the Game of Thrones. She's going to kind of appeal to Cersei a little bit, but her main focus is convincing Joffrey to give him mercy. A strategy someone else is going to use when Ned eventually does die. So again, I find this a very interesting chapter in terms of how to gain power within the realm. If you even think about Marjorie later on in the story as well. But at this, Joffrey and Cersei are announced with the remaining Kingsguard led by Barristan Selmy. But Sansa notes Jaime is the only one absent as all others are present. And that gets us into page 620. She notes as Joffrey takes his steps to the throne how beautiful he is dressed. Again, he's really playing the part. Joffrey continues to play the gallant king role as he looks at her and smiles. Again, there's something that is really apparent here is that Joffrey is continuing to play this role to manipulate Sansa, or maybe even to get Sansa to like him. He definitely is playing that in this chapter, and we'll see that happen a little bit later on in the chapter as well. He says that his job is to reward those who are loyal and punish those who are false, and commands Pycelle to read off the decrees. Again, at this point, Pycelle just names off a bunch of people. These go from really high lords to some more minor people. Like, for instance, he lists off Stannis, Renly, the Tullys, the Starks, even the Dornish to a degree. He lists off the Redwyne twins that all need to bend the knee and swear in that Joffrey is their king. And again, this is just done as a formality. Again, Cersei realizes that a lot of these people are probably going to be against them already, but at this time, that's what they want. Sansa notes how many were on this list and how many ravens it will take to deliver those messages. She even thinks about Arya, and this is an interesting point, right? Because Cersei and Joffrey and Pycelle have Arya on the list. So what does that imply if you're Sansa? That implies, wow, wait, Arya must have survived and or escaped, because the Lannisters, if they knew Arya was dead, they wouldn't have put Arya on this list. So that has to mean that at least to some degree, Arya has escaped. Now, Sansa takes it a step further. Sansa's like, oh, well, Arya must have made it to a galley and is headed towards Winterfell. Very wishful thinking. It's not the worst thought process, right? Like, that's a very minor thing that Sansa picks up on and actually comes to a very logical idea that Arya's escaped. The Lannisters don't know what happened to her. Now, in this situation, the knowledge that Arya or Sansa has, it's more likely that Arya is actually probably dead at this time. But again, I think it's a very interesting speculation and or idea that Sansa thinks about. But that gets us into page 621. Pycelle then says that in Ned's place, Tywin shall become Hand of the King to command his armies. Again, obviously, you just want more Lannister power backing Joffrey. And for Cersei to end up taking Stannis' position on the small council to help govern the realm. Again, just trying to give more Lannister power in the council. But then this is where it kind of takes a dip. This move, in my opinion, makes little to no sense. Because the biggest part of this is Jaina Slynt. How do you deal with this character, Jaina Slynt? Because you have to think Cersei had to have bought Jaina Slynt off of Littlefinger and the Golden Cloaks, or the Gold Cloaks, to turn against Ned. But once Ned is imprisoned, you don't need to give him as big of a reward. And even Tywin notes on this, like, this is such a stupid mistake, but it is stated that Jaina Slynt and his family forever will inherit Harrenhal and all of its titles and grant him a seat on the small council. Again, one of these things I could see, right? Like Jaina Slynt being named to the small council. I still think giving him Harrenhal is a big stretch, but it really shows what we get with Cersei and Feast for Crows. It's Cersei putting people on the small council that she believes she has complete control over, but in reality, they're kind of idiots. And so that's the biggest thing you can kind of take away from this. At this, murmuring and anger goes through the hall. Because again, what are other lords and people going to think about this? Harrenhal is a mighty castle, commands a very strategic position. Yes, it may seem cursed, but it makes your wealth go up quite a lot. And so you give it to this cutthroat, someone that doesn't really have much of a reputation, or at least a good reputation, over people that maybe are more loyal to you, or people that have maybe bled for your family for hundreds of years, people that would, again, it would benefit more to give them a position of power to draw them closer to your family. But no, she gives it to Jaina Slynt. Not a good look. But at this, it kind of gets worse, right? Now, before we get to that, we also get Sansa's description of them, right? As Slynt comes in with his two ugly sons with the banner of a bloody spear that gave her goosebumps to look at. Yeah, again, just Jaina Slynt is just kind of an idiot. And yeah, let's just move on. But as Slynt takes his seat, Pycelle takes his chance to say, with Robert's death, they are concerned about Joffrey's safety and looks to Cersei. And so we have one blunder already from Cersei. We will now see a second one. This one I think is even worse, right? Because I think the possibilities of this could have been even more detrimental if Barristan had actually done something different than what he actually does. But Cersei asks Barristan to step forward and commends his great service and asks him to remove his helm, to Barristan's confusion, right? If you're Barristan, you're sitting here going, what? Why am I getting commanded to do something? I actually didn't really do much during the Ned coup stuff. And then to tell him to take off his helmet is a very curious thing. She then tells him his service is at an end and she is relieving him of his great burden. But Barristan still is confused by this, right? He's a very honorable person, someone very similar to Ned. How can he be relieved of a burden? What does that mean? But Jaina Slynt pipes up, again, ever being the arrogant fool, says that he is dismissed as Lord Commander. And Barristan says the Kingsguard serves until death. But Cersei says, whose death? Yours or your king's? Again, Cersei's going to try to make this about, oh, Barristan is unfit to protect the king because of Robert's death, which again was not Barristan's fault whatsoever. Actually, really none of the Kingsguard, or none of the kings that he's served have actually been his fault at all. And so you look at this and you're going, okay, this is a very lousy excuse, especially with looking at who you're going to bring into the Kingsguard outside of Barristan. It's a really stupid move from Cersei. Just trying to look at her rationale. We can kind of see why she does it. But again, it's her trying to manipulate the situation, but it's just incredibly stupid to do. Barristan is a symbol, right? If you give Barristan over to Stannis, over to Renly, over to Robb Stark, whoever, you have to think about all the stories that go along with Barristan. Think about Barristan's reputation from someone even like Bran, right? Bran, who is someone in the north, they don't really look up to knights and things like that, but even Bran has heard the stories of Barristan the Bold. He wanted to be trained by Barristan the Bold. That carries a lot of weight. It gives a lot of legitimacy to whoever he goes to afterwards and their claim. And so that's why it's so detrimental for Cersei to do this. But let's see what Cersei sees in this, right? Cersei sees Barristan as someone honorable and someone that she cannot control, right? That's the biggest problem that she sees with Barristan. She sees that Barristan almost was swayed by Ned Stark because of the honor stuff. But we also get that Joffrey wants the Hound on the small count, or on the Kingsguard, and so this is kind of part of that. But at this moment, Joffrey fires into the conversation, saying he is too old and that he let his father die. He cannot protect anyone. Again, this is just Joffrey being a complete idiot. I don't know if he actually believes this or he's just saying this as some reasons to get the Hound on the Kingsguard, but yeah, Barristan definitely was not at fault for Robert's death. Again, like Ned had said, Robert died because Robert was being an idiot. But at this, we get one of Barristan's famous quotes from book 1 that I will quote directly here. Also, let me know if you guys actually like me doing these quotes directly from the book. I do enjoy them, especially for memorable lines and things like that. But yes, let's get into the line. Your Grace, he said, I was chosen for the White Swords in my 23rd year. It was all I had ever dreamed. From the moment I first took sword in hand, I gave up all claim to my ancestral keep. The girl I was to wed married my cousin in my place. I had no need of land or sons. My life would be lived for the realm. Sir Gerald Hightower himself heard my vows, to ward the king with all my strength, to give my blood for his. I have fought beside the White Bull and Prince Lewin of Dorne, besides Arthur Dane, the Sword of the Morning. Before I served your father, I helped shield King Aerys, and his father Jaehaerys before him, 3 kings. Again, it just shows the decorated career that Barristan Selmy has, right? The bouts that he's won, how he's basically said as one of the greatest sword fighters of all time, if not the greatest. It's just one of those things that's like, you look at Barristan and he is probably as close to you can have as a true knight. He's an honorable person. He tries to help the weak. He is what a knight should be. He's given his life to be a Kingsguard, right? He has nothing after this, right? Like, think about this. If you're, you know, there's a lot of athletes. I feel like this relates a lot, really well with athletes in the world, where after they get done, there's almost that hunger to keep going, but they can't. They're not able to do so. And so there's kind of that hollow hole there to where a lot of those athletes go into broadcasting, or they'll go into things talking about that sport, or just being involved in it just to be able to do that. And so you think about this world where Barristan doesn't have that, right? There's no way to continue doing that outside of maybe being like a master of arms at some keep or something like that. But that's not what they're offering him, right? As we go forward, we're going to realize what they're offering Barristan is what he says, basically a retirement home to die in. But that gets us into page 623. Littlefinger points out all of them dead, and Cersei adds, his time is done. Joffrey needs younger, stronger men about him, and she plans to have Jaime take his place, to Barristan's dismay. Again, this kind of goes back to Aegon the First and why they even made a Kingsguard. Think about what Visenya taught Aegon there, right? It's not always about having the strongest or the best fighters. It's about men that are willing to die for you, that are loyal to you, that are good people. And that's not what Cersei is valuing at this point. She wants people that are just going to be loyal to the Lannisters, people that are cronies, more or less, that have no shred of honor. That's what she is looking for here. And she believes she's going to find that in the Hound. But also she wants Jaime to take Lord Commander's position because, again, she wants Jaime in a position of more power on the small council, just littering the entire council with only Lannisters. And that's not a good move either, right? Think about Aegon's first small council or Jaehaerys's small council. You want to litter a lot of your small council with a lot of the other lords of the realm so that you feel connected to each part of the realm. You know, Robert, for all the faults that he might have had, he at least did something right by having different people from different parts of the world. He could have done a better job, but if you think about it, at a point, Renly, Stannis, and Ned were all people on the small council. If you even consider Littlefinger, not a great one, but Jon Arryn, right? So you had all of those, a lot of different coalitions in that small council, whereas here, it's just really the Lannisters and a crony, and they're cronies, really, so it's not a great small council, right? You don't have a lot of different perspectives, ways of looking at different things. Varys, again, seeing what's going on, tries a different tactic. He's going to try the same tactic with really Ned, and this is kind of the way he subtly approaches a lot of the situations going on at King's Landing. They appreciated his service and that a bit of land and servants have been set aside for him north of Lannisport. But Barristan once again sees through this, calling it a hole to die in, and begins taking his armor off, saying he is a knight and plans to die a knight. And Littlefinger is really the one that sets it all off, right? He's the one that makes Barristan go to action. He says a joke that he is a naked knight. Again, poking fun at Barristan because he's losing all of his armor. It's again what we talk about in this world, that people tend to see knights as their armor and their weapons and things like that. That's not what's supposed to make a great knight, and that is really basically fully out here. And it's great because we're seeing this through Sansa's POV. This would not hit as hard if it was like a Ned POV or a what other POV, like a Tyrion POV, a Cersei POV. This hits hard because it's Sansa. Sansa is basically kind of like Littlefinger. She sees really gallantry and knights as what they look like, how handsome they are. And this is really an important lesson for Sansa to understand in this chapter. But even in this moment, Sansa felt bad for Barristan. Again, Sansa is not completely a cold-hearted person. She feels bad for him, noting that must have stung. Again, all these people turning on him. Again, his sworn brothers, they're supposed to be brothers to him, and they're turning, laughing at him. Nobody's standing up for him. He's alone. Again, all the honor or all the people that had any true honor or loyalty are gone. But finally, Barristan has enough. He goes for his sword. And we once again get a brilliant speech by Barristan that I will read here. Sansa heard someone gasp. Sir Boris and Sir Meryn moved forward to confront him, but Sir Barristan froze them in place with a look that dripped contempt. Have no fear, sirs. Your king is safe. No thanks to you. Even now, I could cut through the 5 of you as easy as a dagger cuts cheese. If you would serve under the Kingslayer, not a one of you is fit to wear the white. He flung his sword at the foot of the Iron Throne. Here, boy, melt it down and add it to the others if you like. It will do you more good than the swords in the hands of these 5. Perhaps Lord Stannis will chance to sit on it when he takes your throne. And this is a interesting play by Barristan, right? Think about what he just said, right? And we understand why Barristan says it, right? He's angry. He is basically feels like he's been betrayed. He sees that all the honor is gone at this point, and there's nothing left for him. He just lashes out. And I think the interesting part here for Barristan is, like, I don't think he truly believes in Stannis at all. But it's, again, just throwing that salt in the wound for Joffrey and the Lannisters as a whole. But what I find even more interesting is, in a lot of ways, the Lannisters kind of have gotten what they wanted to get. If Barristan was not going to go die off in a hole, they have now given reason to capture Barristan. But they do it completely wrong, right? Because at this point, Barristan is going to take his leave. Again, no one stops him, and this to me is a misstep. If you're going to seize Barristan, do it now, where he can't escape. He's surrounded. You have swordsmen on both walls, some of the Lannister swordsmen, and then also gold cloaks. Take him here. He just threatened that Stannis may take the throne, and he might back him. So again, I am someone that thinks that they should not have let Barristan go, but if you're going to do this, at least execute it correctly, and it just doesn't happen. They just let him go. It's just really stupid. Again, at this point, nobody thinks, oh, maybe we're going to actually capture and seize him, but it's just a lot of incompetence. A lot of people not acting the way they should in these certain situations. But at this, Joffrey is stunned, as Barristan had called him a boy, something that makes Sansa look at him as if he was younger, right? It just makes him look more boyish. But he also notes that he was talking about Stannis, and Varys notes that it's just idle talk, but Joffrey wants Barristan seized, as he could be conspiring with his uncles, and Janis pipes up saying, the gold cloaks will find him. Again, it's just Janis Slynt being a yes man, just kissing ass, and it's just stupid at this point, right? Like, it just shows the incompetence. We know Barristan's going to escape, and I guess you're thinking, oh, there's no way Barristan is going to get out of the city, but it just handled really badly, in my opinion. Littlefinger then looks to continue the court session, stating that they are now in need of a new Kingsguard member, and Joffrey has Cersei announce the decision, to Joffrey's delight, that it will be the Hound. Again, this all comes off as basically a move to get the Hound into the Kingsguard, and it's just very foolish. I mean, I think about all of the Kingsguard here. The last one that should have been dismissed was Barristan. Any of the others, fine. Barristan? Just a really stupid move. But the Hound ponders this, but thinks, why not? He has nothing to lose, but he will not take any knight's vows, to which Boris says, all Kingsguard have been knights, but the Hound notes, until now. And again, if you're the Hound, this must be really ironic. Right? Think about what's just happening here. We just saw one of the truest knights bow out of the Kingsguard, again, breaking all oaths and vows because of Cersei and all these things. And they now want the Hound to be knighted? Why? Like, it's just so funny how like really bad that looks. It's just, I just find that very funny that Boris is like, oh, you have to be a knight. It's like, what? What do you mean you have to be a knight? Like, it's just such a stupid comment. But at this, the King's Herald comes forward, and Sansa is nervous. Again, this is her moment, right? As she creeps up, as she knows it is her turn, she has decided to dress in mourning clothes and black, again for the king, and was even wearing the dress Cersei had given her, the one Arya had ruined, but she had dyed it black. What does that tell us about Sansa right now? It tells us that Sansa is someone that really respects Cersei and looks up to her as a influential, like, role model type. Even after everything that's happened so far, Sansa still really looks up to Sansa and thinks that Cersei actually loves her. Again, it just shows that Sansa's still very naive of the situation going on, but it also shows that Sansa really cares about appearances. We get a long description here of what she wanted to dress like, how it took hours for her to figure out which jewelry she wanted to put on, but it is smart. Because again, if you go back to the beginning of the chapter, I talked about the way Sansa's playing this Game of Thrones right now is she's going after Joffrey. She wants to gain his influence, which is very smart. And so she's trying to dress as pretty as possible for him. But the herald announces if anyone has any other matters to bring before the king, step forward. She was extremely nervous, and this reminds me quite a lot of Arya's escape from the Red Keep, where she just has to put one foot in front of the other. This really mirrors this part for Sansa. She takes one step out and slowly moves forward, but Joffrey is the first to see her, as the throne's height gave it a better vantage point. Again, something we didn't really see on the show too much, but in the book, again, you're much higher than everyone else. The throne is really meant to show your power and your strength, and it gives you a way that you're able to be more vigilant of what's going on in the throne room. All of that is put on full display here at this moment. He tells her to step forward, smiling. Again, he's always smiling with Sansa. He's trying to make her feel good. It is, again, this role that he's playing so perfectly. It's something that I think the show didn't really do the best, because I think in the book, from Sansa's POV, it's much more understandable as to why she falls for Joffrey and avoids his red flags. In the show, they kind of missed that element of making Joffrey kind of play the role of the gallant prince with Sansa, but he really does a great job here, again, basically convincing her that he does love her, or at least has some crush on her. But his smile emboldened her, and she knew she must not look nervous, as she goes to where Barristan had been, his cloak still on the ground. And Cersei asks if she has something for them. Sansa says she does, and pleads for mercy for her father. Again, I want to point out, this is all a show, right? Everybody and their mother knew that this was going to happen, and I find it interesting the way this plays out. Like, Cersei's like, oh, I'm so disappointed, and says, what have I told you of traitor's blood? And it's just like, okay, Cersei, you wanted Sansa to do this. It's a show for the public, right? To make it look like Cersei's not being too nice to Ned. But as well as Pycelle noting that Ned has committed a great crime. And that gets us into page 626. Varys notes how sad she is, and she does not know what she is asking, but Sansa looks to Joffrey, knowing he was her only hope, and Joffrey says to allow her to speak. Again, Sansa is bypassing all the small council people because she realizes that Joffrey is the one that holds the real power in this situation. Pycelle says traitors must be uprooted stem and root, and Littlefinger asks if she denies his crimes. It's interesting what Pycelle notes here, that again, traitors must be uprooted stem and root. It implies that, like, you need to basically kill an entire house. You have to basically do it the Tywin route, and we've kind of had this debate in past videos on the channel. What route do you really take when it comes to traitors, right? People that betray your family. Do you make friends with them, or do you kill them? Do you forestall possible rebellions or try to end them, but do ending that rebellion, showing your cruelty, cause other rebellions? It's something people like Bloodraven and Baelor Breakspear had to deal with quite a lot in their different ideologies on that idea, especially with the Blackfire rebellions. Sansa says no, that again, she's not denying the crimes, right? But she asks for mercy for him, as he loved Robert a lot and did not even want to be hanged. Someone must have lied to him, Stannis or Renly. And this is an interesting outlook from Stannis, because it's a correct argument. If you're going to make any argument to make Ned seem more sympathetic, make your father kind of look a little foolish, right? Make it feel like he was led on by some of these other people right now that are significant. Stannis and Renly are now public enemy number one outside of like a Robb character at this point. And this piques Joffrey's interest, right? Because Joffrey, in a lot of ways, is kind of motivated by, why would Ned say that he was not king, right? We know that Ned thinks that Joffrey is a bastard and all of Joffrey's siblings are as well. And so Joffrey wants to see if there's some other reasoning here to get him out of that scenario. And Sansa is happy to hear this. Again, she's been playing this whole conversation out in her head hundreds, thousands of times of exactly what to say. And so she knows that she has Joffrey's interest in how to manipulate him further, which is important to understand for the character of Sansa going forward, is that she's already showing those signs of being able to play the Game of Thrones. She's just not great at it yet. She doesn't understand how all the moving pieces are at this point. She responds eagerly, saying his leg was broken and the milk of Poppy must have been going to his head again. So now you have another element to it, right? You're already putting into Joffrey's head the idea that it was Stannis and Renly. Those were the two people that really were driving Ned's actions. Also combined with the idea that he was heavily medicated and that was clouding his judgment. Varys says this is a child's faith, but sometimes wisdom can be found in children. And Pycelle notes treason is treason. Again, just a couple different ways of looking at it. I think Varys, his little birds, he understands that can be uses in wisdom in children, but also Pycelle just says treason is treason, which, again, taking kind of more of a blood raven or, him fangirling over Tywin. Joffrey looks to his mother, and she says if Ned was to confess his crimes, he could be seen as repenting them. Again, if this wasn't hammered in your mind already that this is basically a play, something that's already been acted out, we're just showing it to the people, this is your point. Joffrey asks if she has anything else to say as he rises off of the throne, and Sansa says that if he loves her, to do her this kindness, and Joffrey notes her words have moved him. Again, Joffrey playing the good prince, the good king role with Sansa, kind of leading her on. And he nods at her as if everything was going to be all right. Again, if you needed more like subtle foreshadowing here that everything is not going to be all right, this is the moment. But he continues saying he will do as she asks, but only if Ned confesses his crimes. And this is all Sansa wanted to hear. She's overjoyed by this as she says that, again, that he will repent his crime, or that he will confess his crimes. And that's the end of the chapter. So again, this is a huge chapter for Sansa because it's showing a lot of her future skills that she's going to have in the story, as well as really exploring the character of Sansa. And she can be very smart in this chapter, but also very naive as well. Also showing us kind of how this system with the Lannisters is going to work, and a lot of the missteps that they take in this chapter will lead to why Tyrion becomes Hand of the King later on in A Clash of Kings. So again, I think this is all very relevant. It's a very important chapter. I'd say it's one of, if not Sansa's best chapter in this book. So thank you guys all for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.